Hey, this is Jacob. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. Today we've got special guest Sam McDavitt with us of McDavid Publishing and his board game Everstone. And we dive into the topic of origins, what we learned, what we found worked, and discussing how you can thrive and survive in a major convention setting. Let's dive in.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Bring your pretty face to my ad.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined not by Sean nor by Rick. Instead, we are joined by Jacob Cecil and Sam McDavitt of McDavid Publishing, the crafter and creator and publisher and all the things guy of Everstone Discovering Ignis. Welcome to the show. For the edification of our audience, share who you are and the business that you run, and why you, in essence, you have authority to talk about this stuff and why they should actually care about what you have to say.
So I'm Sam McDavid. Last year, I founded the company McDavid Publishing to launch our first Kickstarter, which we did back in February. Much to the thanks of the help of you guys here for running the initial launch. We ran a humble campaign. We were talking offline about some of the other clients you've worked with, and so we raised north of $55,000. And as like a first-time creator, kind of just running outside of like the help from you guys and a few others, just on my own, is something that I feel extremely proud of. And so we launched back in February. I got the email earlier today that we should have our full assembled copy sent to us this Friday. So we're gearing up for that full completion of the Kickstarter within the calendar year, which is, if that comes to fruition, will be a cool checkbox to have checked off. And so, last weekend, Andrew, your company and my company attended Origins. And so I thought it'd be fun to hop on the call with you guys where you can speak as a first-time publisher with product, and I can speak towards of the smaller few steps behind you where we didn't have actually product to sell while in our booth.
Awesome. And Jacob, who are you, and why is that mustache so awesome?
Why am I here? The mustache is here because my hair no longer grows on my head, so I had to do something to add some flair. No, my name is Jacob Cecil. I work with Andrew at Crowdfunding Nerds. So I specialize in doing graphic design work, designing landing pages and ad creatives, and also oversee and run marketing campaigns, pre-marketing and live campaigns.
Yep. Very cool. And you've worked for us for, so you went, I want to say like 18 months part-time, and it was a long time. And then you transitioned to full-time when?
I transitioned to full-time back in September. So we are right at about the 9-month mark of being full-time.
Yep. That's awesome. And you went to the convention with me to run the Lowen Games booth and Deliverance. But this isn't the first convention that we've been to together, right?
Right. Yeah, we attended GAMA together this year. So that was the first big game convention that I had been to, and then obviously tagging along for Origins was great.
Yeah. Just curious, what were the differences? I mean, Gamma runs Origins as an organization. They own Origins and the Gamma trade show. What were the big differences for you, just as a first time person, from the outside, finally brought in and seeing both of them back to back? What was the big difference? What were the big differences for you?
For me, Gamma was definitely a lot more of a casual experience as far as like what it felt like to get to the show floor. At least from my standpoint, it's definitely a lot more informative. It's a great place for first-time creators to make contacts if they want to talk to other publishing groups or other individuals that are in that design space. There's a lot of individuals running seminars and breakout sessions to kind of share their expertise and pass on advice. So I feel like it's a very informative convention if you are in that kind of design space and kind of trying to get a feel for things. And obviously, I think Gamma is definitely more geared toward retailers as well, just to be exposed to what sort of products to see on the or coming down the pipeline, things that they may want to carry in their stores. Again, there's a lot of first-time publishers or small-time publishers that are present at Gamma And that provides a really great opportunity for them to meet retailers and potentially make connections to get their own product in those stores, outside of running a crowdfunding campaign. So once they've reached fulfillment, they may have product that they're trying to move. So being able to meet some retailers that they can share their product to, it provides a really great opportunity for them to make those kind of connections.
That's awesome. And then what in particular about Origins stood out to you as far as like what its major differences were from Gamma?
Yeah. So with Origins, it was actually kind of neat because, again, I came into it with no experience whatsoever. It was my first time being at Origins, so I didn't know what to expect from uh, the crowd and the audience that's coming in. If it was going to be um, pretty intense as far as people trying to like rush booths to buy product. And I definitely know that there were several publishers that did sell out of product. I mean, we sold out of Deliverance, if that's a teaser or not. So that was pretty great. But I was surprised to see that, like, Origins, at least from several of the attendees that talked to me that are longtime Origins attendees, that they really enjoy Origins because they feel like it's the better con if you want to be able to demo and play games. And so they were like, the gaming hall is a lot easier to kind of navigate and to break out into, to set up and run games. And a lot of people's booths are geared more towards running demos of their games and showing off their games. So I think the attitude for a lot of the attendees with Origins is that they're coming with the mindset that they want to try to jump in and test out some of these products that are on the market or that are coming to the market.
Very cool. I it was also my first time attending Origins, and so I didn't know what to expect. I um have heard about it, and I had so what I did was I sought out the counsel of several of our clients that were, experienced. We talked to, I want to say, Chris Birch of Modifius Entertainment, who, funny enough, he said he's never been to Origins either. As experienced as that company is, they had their products there, and this is something that's very interesting. Using a company called World of Game Design. They had several of their IPs there. Fallout was there, and World of Game Design was talking about what they're doing with the Fallout IP and how interactive they're making events and other things like that, which I thought was really cool. But so I talked to them. I talked to Chip Cole from Squatchy Games and Dave Beck and of Distilled and running Paverson Games and a couple of others just to seek advice and what would you generally recommend and that kind of thing. And some of the advice was standard, like for every convention, and then some was like Origin specific. But I'm curious, Sam, what before I share what I learned, before the convention, first of all, have you gone to Origins before?
So this was my second time attending. Last year, I went. I helped with obscure reference games. I helped just kind of run demos at their booth, and in like the hours I wasn't working, I was flooding to the unpub room to just like get demos as I could of Everstone and play others, and then just like living in the open play area with my uh, looking back on it, less than stellar prototype of the game, kind of just with it all set up with the looking for players sign.
Yeah.
So that experience was very different than this year, where I was just a team of two in the booth, kind of working those 10+ hour days, kind of just standing and talking to people.
Yep. Yeah. So now, the for me, I heard. So I had one in particular. Chip Cole of Squatchy Games. He said that he sold 60 of his games last year, and and I think they sold out since then, and so they didn't return this year. But they're kind of like in between Kickstarters and fulfillment and whatnot. And so he said that he felt like Origins was going to be heavier as far as like it skews toward heavier gamers. And I actually agree with that. I think that Origins after attending, so what I decided to do, one of the big questions is if you have product to sell, how much do you bring with you? Because you want to bring product because people will just straight up buy it right there. And then but you don't want to bring too much because that means you have to send a lot of that stuff home and figure that out. How am I going to get it home and all of that? So I thought that I would actually ended up having like 50, I think it was 59 games that we had left in the warehouse. So we had Bridge, which is our warehousing company and fulfillment company for the US and Canada. We had them bring all the stock that they had at their warehouse with them. They brought a box truck up with all of their clients' stuff, and ours was there. It was like $350 to get it up there. And if we were able to sell all of the games, it would be $0 to bring things back. They said that they were willing to just take our stuff, the display stuff back, for free, because it was like real small and easy to carry. But the big question for me at first was, how many games do I bring? And I decided if Chip, he had like a $49 product, a lighter game, Cryptid Cafe, kind of like I want to say a pick up and deliver or like recipe making game. And for me, I have this $99 product. I figured I could sell, if it was a game, if it was a convention that skews toward heavier gamers, I could sell that many games. I could sell 60. And we ended up selling 66. So, which is cool, which meant that I have 7 of them that I have to ship out of my house still. So, so it was very successful for us as far as that. One other thing that we did was we brought our t-shirts. I was just going to bring enough t-shirts for the team. We had a total, like, volunteers and everything. We had 9 people that were going to be helping, and including myself. And I just decided, instead of like giving just those people shirts, I would just bring all the shirts, because we ended up having about 3 boxes worth of shirts left. And I'm so glad I did. We made an extra probably between $500 to $1,000 from t-shirts. People that just became super passionate fans that bought 3 shirts each and came back and ordered 3 more. And people that just saw the shirts, thought they were cool and wanted to buy one. That was much more common than I thought it was going to be. And it was funny because every once in a while I would tell people the legend of the Deliverance t-shirt, which has a very storied existence. And they would often, I would say I sold a shirt to someone who didn't originally intend on buying a shirt. Once I told them the legend, they're like, well, now I need to have one, so they would add one as $25 or whatever. And, they feel the quality and they love them and all of that. So that was really cool. But it is a little scary, like, when you're thinking about how much do I bring, because if I brought 150 units, then I would have had to bring a lot of it home too. So, and I do think that there's something to be said for when the units start dwindling and don't look like there are very many left. It makes people like snap, pull the trigger to buy. So, if I had 150 units, I might actually only bring 30 out on the show floor at a time, so that when they sell out, it looks like, oh, we're selling out. And or maybe I would hide. We had tables that were run for just specifically demos, but if I could conceal product, under a table or something like that, I think that'd be a good idea. So anyway, what are your like general thoughts? What did you do, like, as far as preparation? Who did you get advice from, or rather, what advice did you get?
Well, so I did use the podcast. You did have an awesome episode leading up, just like with just con prep and things you can do. And last year I had the benefit of being able to interview blanking on his name, Mind Management,
Jay Cormier.
about like, he's got a great YouTube channel of like going through the process of them, like the step by step of how they took actions to like get that crowdfunding game from like concept to market to then fulfilled. And so I had a lot of background on just like, things that you want to do as a designer to like get good feedback on the game from playtesting, because that was all last year. So that information kind of fell out of date because I had the final day, like not out of date, but just different information that I wasn't like going to use in practice this time. So I found that the episode you guys launched either 2 weeks ago or a week ago was really helpful in just like the that safety check where you run the stress tests of, okay, do I have banners? Yes, check, boom. Do I have like a plan for how to get people in the booth? Like, what is the opening like conversation that I lead to? Boom. Do I like visualize what your setup's going to look like so that when you get there, you aren't just like sticking things unintentionally. Like that type of like general convention presence information was all like super helpful.
Mhm.
Which some of the stuff like I'll give them a shout out because it's been like the number one thing that I would give as just general advice for anyone as an entrepreneur is if you have access to score.org within your area. It's a group of like retired CEOs that give their time to help like the entrepreneurial spirit, like myself. Just they partner you with someone to teach you, like, if you've never done a like a cash flow spreadsheet, like they'll walk you through that process. Even coming up with business taglines, so I met with them a couple times, and they had, former head of marketing that would like give me all the advice on how to run like giveaways or raffles. You know, just dumping a ton of information in like 2 weeks of just learning what to do was sort of the way I absorbed all of my prep. And so I don't have like a specific checklist that I did. I would just listen into that episode on repeat, and then the recordings that I had with those meetings, just to like almost like that the concept of like sleeping on your textbook before a test, like it's just going to somehow seep into your brain. That was sort of the process I did for the lead up. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, I think that's that's actually kind of cool. Score.org is a really cool resource that I've actually never heard of before, and I'm interested in kind of diving in.
yeah, it's all
So
volunteer based. So all outside of now that I'm a raving fan, that I haven't put any, like there's been no financial investment that I put towards them.
that's fantastic. Well, maybe one day you can return as a mentor and pay it forward, right? It's the idea,
That's
I
my hope.
guess. So yeah, so then some of the standard advice that I learned this from, through of course asking others, but then fire hardening the knowledge through about, I want to say, between 6 and 8 conventions. I've been to maybe we'll say between 6 and 12 conventions for Deliverance before we actually had product to sell. And um I learned a lot, but some of the things that are super important that I knew we should do, that I'm really glad we did, were cough drops and water in the booth. Those two things were really,
Yeah.
really important. One other thing that I felt like was the presence of the booth was really important. And just I mean, there were a couple of new things that I learned along that, but like overall, just making sure that the booth looked good was my intent. It was really important. I was told, "Hey, you need to get a floor for your convention booth," and that you can get like $69. You can go on Amazon, get 144 square feet of like half-inch thick foam like puzzle pieces, and then you can throw that away at the end of the convention. It's actually cheaper to throw away and then repurchase. I didn't throw mine away. Instead, I gave it away to a friend. Jacob was like, "I'll take it for puzzle mats for the garage," and then another guy was like, "No, I'll take it." And his kids ended up building epic forts with it the first day at home. Anthony of Allies of Majesty. So that I was told, and it ended up being a huge difference maker. The floor that we did for our booth was really, really important because the floor is concrete that you have to stand on. And I actually was I think that I stood on that floor for maybe, an hour out of the 9 hours of convention hall openings. So I stood on concrete for 8 hours a day, and at least more than that if you consider walking around and going to the open gaming area and that kind of thing. And that like is actually pretty dang tough on your hips and your knees and everything. And I'm it makes a big difference to have that floor. So I was told, get a floor. It's really important. It was really inexpensive, and I'm really glad we did. So but
Yeah,
what
we
did you
actually
do that?
opted, like I heard the advice, and like I think it's brilliant to like just ship and deliver there. We were under the gun just because it was me and a volunteer who's a friend of mine. So I opted against it, and
Mhm.
I tell you, like I've never felt that like pain in my lats than standing on concrete for 12
Oh
hours.
yeah.
It's like one of those where like there's no stretch that I could find to just like get that relief. So it was like that was one of the like knowing for next time like is 100% a non-negotiable, because the reason I opted out was I thought it was more for like the consumer of like a benefit to like whoever's coming in your booth and whatnot. but they're only there for like depending on how long you're running the overviews for, and if you're running demos, they're sitting down. So it's really for your benefit and preservation of like Saturday and Sunday. It was like,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, well, I'm
Well,
kind of in your boat in some way because I was like, well, I don't mind suffering. Like I'll save $69 and suffer, but I don't want my customers to suffer. And man, my team was the one that would suffer, and so I'm really glad that we got it. It's really inexpensive. You don't need to load the entire floor, so I could have had I could have spent like another $40 or whatever to get the square footage necessary to make 200 square feet, which would be the 10 by 10 area. But we ended up completely fine with 144 square feet, because we just made it so that our big back banner was not uh on the floor, and so it was pretty easy to get that floor to look intentional, like we meant it to be where it was. And so anyway, that was a really interesting thing that I'm glad we did, but I learned for the first time, like, yes, that's very important. So when you go to a convention, make sure that you know what kind of flooring that is there. I think concrete flooring is really smart for a convention center, but like a stained concrete floor. But man, it is brutal on your body to stand there. You're already exhausting your voice. You just don't want to be exhausting your knees. It's a whole lot better to engage with people when you're standing rather than sitting. But really your only recourse is to sit. It's like give a break to your knees. And then even then, your hinge joints being so rusty like the Tin Man from standing for so long, it's just when you sit down, they're just gonna go like they're gonna themselves be like concrete. It's gonna be hard to move them after you stand up. So that little half-inch of padding makes such a big difference. Over a 4-day convention. I set up on Wednesday, but then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so I thought that was interesting. Now, what about like your booth positioning? I know we had kind of some conversation about this offline, but go over for me where you were positioned relative to all the things. Like why did you choose the position that you had? Um, or were you kind of pigeonholed into that? And what 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 did you learn? What would you have done differently? Um, and all that in regard to positioning your booth.
Yeah, so I guess I was pigeonholed in a sense where when my sign up time was like slotted to choose where I wanted to be located, because I was only I only had a 10 by 10 demo booth that like sectioned off a certain area of the convention to begin with, um which it also, like, during the Zoom call of when I had placement, I was traveling to a different convention to run Everstone, so I opted with like the night before I saw, what was taken up on the map and what was available. And I like looked at it briefly and just shot an email to Julie, who kind of runs the back end with exhibitors and stuff like that for Gamma, and was like, hey, if I could be like in the 800s or 600s, uh, you know, that would be fantastic. And I really just picked those because I recognized low end games. I was like, oh, worst case, like Deliverance might pull a big crowd. So that was my thinking of like try and be near something that like I know there was gonna be traffic to. But
Yep.
what I didn't realize is the way they have the aisles set up is you have the two end caps, which like are for all of the main foot traffic going like the long way of the convention, which are like super high visible and like great spots to be in that I don't I'd have to pull up the map to the heat map to see if
Yeah,
any of
let
those are
me
still
let me
available.
actually I'm gonna hit I'm gonna share my screen real quick, and we're gonna look at the exhibitor. So for those watching on YouTube, we're gonna share the screen and show where the exhibitor booth is. So there's low end games right there. The hall entrance is down here. You can see my mouse like whirling around. This is I want to say it's like hall A or hall no, this is hall B. And then over here you've got hall B, or maybe it's hall A. And these two entrances were the ones that people dominantly would enter through. You've got like exits around the back, that were closed off. So that's generally, these bathrooms were not eligible to be used. There's also another bathroom like right in the center. This whole area was like roped off, and I have a feeling that the reason that they did this with the special guest signing area here in the back was because there were actually a lower number of vendors that wanted to join than, let's say, before, pre-COVID. And so I thought that was really interesting in and of itself. And then McMeeple Publishing, where were you? So you were like 800s to 600s?
So yeah, you see where 601 is?
Yes.
We were 623 or 33.
Okay.
So
So
like
there
the
you were right there.
blank, yeah. Which, so the way that like column, if you want to stay zoomed in for a second, where lay of the land and then the two back corners of action
here.
fiction and those two, they
Uh-huh.
actually have giant walls going on their back end as their back display. And
Uh-huh.
then the three column ones have like two almost like hip size dividers.
Yeah.
And so if I could have like swapped with 635, I think
Yeah,
there
to
would
the
have been
middle, right?
yeah, so much more visibility there. And it may actually have been open when I like sent their request, but I just
Mhm.
from this layout that was showing you like the
Yep.
the height of walls I didn't think about, because that was something that even though I was there last year, I'm like my brain is teach the game, make a good
Mhm.
experience for the customer. You're not
Yeah.
totally observing around those. So we actually had a like 10-foot by 8-foot wall blocking us from all of like the foot traffic.
Yeah, so
And
this big aisle that goes horizontal, you couldn't see McDavid Publishing unless you were looking from a particular angle, right? It's like
yeah, which
line of sight in a complex dungeon crawl board game. Can you see the two corners of this? So so I guess a takeaway from this would be if you had to get into the middle of a booth, is that fair to say?
that would be like the instant if I like, so I guess next year my goal is to have a 10 by 20 and bring our illustrator, because one of
Mhm.
the pros of our game is I think TJ did such a beautiful job with the art that I'd
Yeah.
love to give the opportunity for like him to have prints and sell prints, because
Mhm.
based on our timelines we're going to run into that weird spot where Origins is going to lie, where we've just ran hopefully our second Kickstarter project for a different title, and if everything goes well with Everstone, we won't have really inventory for that either. So we'll
Yep.
be in that same spot of not necessarily having like a value to sell, but more of like meet and grow with the community. But
Yeah.
having one of those front like in aisle spots where you're almost unavoidable is the goal for next year,
Mhm. Yep.
of doing one of the end caps. But if I were to do the same thing, it would be, yeah, go to the highlighted spot that you have, just because no matter what, you have more visibility than where we were last year
Yeah.
or this past weekend.
Yeah, that's really smart. For me, I had this 10 by 20. So first of all, this hall entrance, I think it's really smart to align yourself at a hall entrance, because people walk in and they just walk straight. They may walk to the right or to the left, but a lot of them are just going to walk straight down the aisle. And in some cases, my goal was actually to make our booth a destination. So for all of our fans that owned games already, I wanted them to come to our booth so that they could pick up a free gift, which is one thing that we did that I'm really glad we did. So anyone that bought a copy of Deliverance or already owned a copy of Deliverance got what I call a scenario pack. It's like it was like 1 to 3 missions of free content that's normally in a PDF that everybody gets, but it's we made physical editions. I just went to FedEx or not FedEx, I'm sorry. I went to gosh, what is it called? Print Play Games, and they did like a spiral bound books. It was like a dollar a piece or something is what it ended up being. And we made like 100 of them. And so that's what I thought. Like I was here in the back, and when it came time for us to choose, we were on like wave 6, and there were 5 waves of publishers that chose their booth placement before us. And I thought, I went to Gamma, I'm a Gamma member, and I have a 10 by 20 booth. So I'll probably get my choice of, at least a decent location. My original intent was to get one that was like in the middle somewhere, so that all the cross traffic and all the people walking up and down everywhere would see us. But in actuality, all of those were taken because everybody had the same bright idea. And so I thought, okay, there's this new special guest signing area in the back. If I make it so that there is no booth in front of me, and there's this wide open space that people can look, they'll see my booth when they turn around after signing, after these special guests, right? And so that was my intent. But what I didn't realize that was a real benefit was that, and I was like one of the first people to sign up for a section like this. There were so like Artist Alley is what it's called, it's like right behind us, and then we had a big giant curtain that you couldn't really see, behind it. It was like that separating wall, so you really had no idea that we were there until you rounded the corner. And it ended up working out for reasons that were different than I thought. But our booth was slammed the entire time. It was so slammed. And it was a very successful convention for us, way more successful than I thought that it would be. And the positioning had definitely had something to do with it. Now, I'm not sure about, let's say, if we were to get one of these like end caps, like you said, like one of the end caps in the middle area, I think that it would have also been good. It's just that when you have a booth that's in a highly trafficked area, then the onus, or rather the incentive for the visitor, is to continue moving on, if that makes sense. You've got a lot of traffic going one way and the other way down that aisle. And so even though you're in the aisle and able to be seen, there's a lot of traffic that encourages people to move along, not like overstay their welcome. And so what I had this end cap that had like nothing in front of me, and it was a good place to stop and like watch and get your bearings and think about what you wanted to do and that kind of thing. And so that was one thing that allowed people, so it didn't naturally cause people to congregate there. The natural behavior of people, I noticed, was just to walk and make a U-turn slowly and go down the aisle on the other side. But many of them would see our art, see the booth, the way that we set it up, and slow down and stop, and at a certain point, which is something I'd love to talk about. But overall, this section at the end, and I think if I was, let's say, like over a couple of booths, like over here, to the left where there wasn't any direct hall entrance, I think there would have been less people walking up the aisle. So I think that the aisles next, right at the hall entrance area is are the best aisles for sure. And I did not regret at all this awesome section that we were able to score. So
Yeah, one like two things to make note specifically for Origins that I've seen is you can kind of see on the left side those like side arrows. They have like two entry points from like the open gaming area, which I didn't realize would be as heavily trafficked of entrance and exits that I like just from watching ongoers.
mhm.
And so like to be able to be in line with either of those like mainstream areas going horizontally is another spot like which you guys are pretty much aligned with as well, which I think was an awesome, like whether that was intentional or not, like an awesome result. And I noticed that like the back right corner would, like if there was like a heat map of tracking movement of people, like that was probably the least frequented area of just
Mhm.
like where there wasn't congestion of when I did my like post bathroom walk through everything because we only had
Yep.
like 5-minute breaks between Steven and I. It seemed to like you had the most breathing room there, and I'd imagine that's just because
Mhm.
people like similar to what you said, there wasn't a ton of like vendor signups, so where they were blocking off the
Yep.
appearance of like emptiness behind. I think
Mhm.
caused people to be less ambitious of like, if they couldn't like for whatever reason see all of the hall due to just like being
Yep.
tired or whatnot, that seemed to be like the easiest area to like remove
Yeah.
from the must hit destinations. And I
Yep, it
think
was it was very interesting because I went to this so this gaming trend is over here on the like the very top right, surrounded by nothing. And that's exactly what they wanted because they were recording like live shows the whole day. And so it was actually much more quiet in that area. And it was good for them, But it was interesting because right next to them was this restaurant that was closed. It was some kind of like taco restaurant that never opened, and I thought that was a missed opportunity because then you'd have a ton of people that would go there, right? And so that was kind of an interesting thing. But I definitely felt like the number one place to be is like near a hall entrance. If you can get in the front, you've got a lot of these 20 by 20 booths and then larger that all, they got their first pick. They could go generally wherever they wanted, and they chose to be in the front by entrances. And I think that is very, I don't want to call it obvious necessarily, but it was, a very clear yes, this is something that you want to do. Um, then I find that the halls that are next to the entrances or that are in front of the entrances, people tend to walk those halls more often. So position yourself next to a hall. I do think that your mileage, the way that it varies is if you are kind of couched in like you were. I feel like that's the just kind of an unfortunate place to be stuck if you've got like an end cap. Um, it's like this. I don't know, these guys right here. It's harder to see. Or this one up here. Like I would like to be in the middle, like you said. So if I had a 10 by 10 booth, I would try to make it in the middle of two other 10 by 10s if possible. And so I thought that was a really interesting observation. So,
yeah.
but yeah.
One last note of you had mentioned where as a customer you kind of feel like you just like with that flow of you don't want to disrupt the flow of people walking. One thing that even though our placement would have been what I like would have chosen in the future, the way we
Mhm.
set up our booth is we had like 3 feet behind the aisle. We had this gap where it was almost like a rest stop on the highway where people could come in and like while we were doing 5 minute overviews. I think that was a huge way of like drawing them in.
Yep.
I think you guys might have mentioned it on the podcast of just like it's sort of welcoming them, like feeling like they're stepping into your own space. I
Yeah.
found that anyone that like took that step and like crossed the tape line of where our 10 by 10 started to
Mhm.
either sit down and learn about the game or kind of just stand over the table and watch.
Yep.
We had a really high conversion of email signups from
Okay.
those people, which was really cool.
That's awesome. So one other thing I wanna just call out again because you mentioned this, like there are these arrows that indicate where people will be walking from and walking to, like these entrances. The top kind of far back corner entrance was to the open gaming area, and then the nearby entrance to the hall entrances was there were actually booths on the left side of this wall. And so, you've got like booths on this side here, and then open gaming in this area. And one thing I found that was really difficult to try to understand was like, how do I figure out what is where? Like that was a really tough thing. So, for me, my benchmarks for the future are going to be the hall entrances, where it says hall entrance or whatever, as well as the bathrooms. Bathrooms, everybody's got to go to the restroom, and you're going to get a lot of traction there. So I think it was pretty smart to. I went to this Alpha Clash booth a lot. Some friends of mine and the Cephalofair Games and Gatekeeper Games and Miniature Market. These four, and then Brotherwise, I got friends there. I think that they were constantly well trafficked because of restrooms and whatnot. Um, and so in particular the men's restroom. But I will also say that I don't know what's going on with that men's restroom, but urinals just were dropping, every day there was more plastic covering urinals. Like, how can you mess up a urinal? But people do, like it's like it just seems to have the fewest failure points of any tool that men use, and yet they still find a way to blow it up. And they were just dropping and dropping until finally that bathroom was locked because all the urinals were bad. I don't know why. I will also say that I think that my experience was that the convention staff, the in particular the people that were assigned to clean the restrooms or service the restrooms were the laziest people that I've ever seen do their job. Like they actually would sit and have their equipment on the outside, so it looked like they were working. And they would like sleep in there. It was crazy. It was like really bad.
I think
So
when it exploded, there was a worker that was asleep on the counter, and they
yeah.
had locked him in. So there was a guy that was trying to get out. That was an employee that had fallen asleep on the sink.
That's so gnarly. Yeah. So that's evidently like a regular thing. But so anyway, so overall, like positioning was really good. Now, what about like booth design? Like what did your booth look like? You know?
So we had one of the, I want to say it's 3x8 tables or something like that, where
Okay.
we had one long table that we had the like. I was thinking originally having like we had two pre-production copies that we were going to show off, and I thought that it would, Steven would be demoing one, I could demo the other, or we could just have one and show off the parts. But we opted to do less is more and
Mhm.
only have one like setup of the actual game. And after day one, we even chose to like, Everstone plays 1 to 4. And so we had it a 3-player setup with one of the players also set up to show how solo would work. We dropped it to just a 2-player game just
Mhm.
because there weren't like a ton of remarks, but like I heard kind of people walking by just being like, oh, that's a bear to set up. And like one of the key aspects that I think is a really good selling point of Everstone is the speed that it can get to the table
Yeah.
because of the custom insert that we have with like it removes and sets up like super easily and quick.
Mhm.
So we dropped it to 2, and that even gave us space to show off that custom insert, which I
Yeah.
think was like a small thing that like you miss opportunities like that where it's just like you're only thinking of gameplay. You should be thinking of like the total product when displaying it. So
Yep.
we had that one table about 3 feet back from like the hall and or the alley, and we opted to push it against one edge so that like it wasn't taking up the whole space, but just on one side. And
Mhm.
then on the opposite wall, we had our I want to say 6.5 foot, 7 foot banner. It was like
Mhm.
the same style banner that you had with all like the Deliverance characters.
Yeah.
We had one of those, which originally we had in not on the barrier wall because we
Mhm.
wanted to show off the art to get drawn people in, but
Yep.
to be polite to our neighbors, we moved it so it wasn't blocking them.
Yeah.
Um, and then on the back, one of the lessons learned from last time is I think it's a missed opportunity to not do one of those full bleed art backgrounds.
Mhm.
Um, because it just from like in comparison, like they have name tags or just our 8x10 little pieces of paper to show who's at the booth. Uh, it looks so dinky and like embarrassing when you just have like a little like almost like it's just a sheet of printer paper
Right.
compared to
With your
like
name.
yeah, it was one of those. It's like when I saw it, it's like, well, we're stuck. We got to make the most of what we have. But
Yep.
that 10x10 or that 10 foot by however tall the walls are is
Mhm.
definitely a banner that even though it's more expensive, I think you get more mileage on it.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
one of the things that I didn't like think about and like because people just talk about where and how and what type of banners to have. They don't talk about like the hierarchy of like what's important on the banner, where it's
Yeah.
like anything from the waist down on the banner, you just have it be the pretty graphic art that like if it's shown, it's amazing. If it's not, like there's no love lost because we had for our smaller banner, like we had Everstone on the bottom and hindsight, like I would have flip flopped where we put our company name and where we put the game name. Not
Mhm.
that like either were not visible, but it just like right now, Everstone is what's gonna like sell and make the company. Like that's
Yeah.
what is going to drive success if we have success, and you want that to be seen. Which ties into like we had stickers as our like free takeaway where anyone that stopped and listened, like TJ did incredible art, so we just had a few like 5 different variations of stickers to just
Yeah.
hand out. And if you're doing stickers, make sure the name of the game is on all the stickers. So I ended up pulling 2 of each of them just so I can mail them to TJ. But we
Yeah.
had like a circle one with the title box art, and then what are arguably cooler pieces of
Yep.
like some of the different relics. Like even though they're cool art, everyone was taking the circle just because it's a reminder of this is what I saw and this is why I saw it was cool.
Yep.
And then we had our little company logo, which this is the one we have, the only one we have extras of. And then the Everstone circles, like they were gone by Saturday just because like
Yeah.
it was just the
It's like the
easiest
main
takeaway
thing.
for reminding. Yeah.
Yep.
So that would be like have something, but have something that ties the memory back to you. Where
Yep.
like it would have been no issue to just have on these stickers like Everstone and small text below it. Like it wouldn't have taken away. It was definitely like one of my goals was to have all the stickers given out, which was great. But it's in one of the I'm jumping around here, but
That's okay. I love every
like
moment.
I'll finish on this thought of like when they get back home and they're looking at all these awesome stickers, like there's no guarantee they're going to remember like what that product came from. Like if you're doing like cool dice or cool components from the game,
Yep.
like really think about what like that branding is going to be so important.
Yep.
Not only for like just like growing your brand, but like people won't take like things that are free unless they can find value of it, and that memory aspect of like, oh, when I get home I'm going to look at the Kickstarter in 10-15 like minutes to like really look at the game where I don't have that smiling face looking at me pressuring me to like smile back.
Yep.
I got to remember how to get to it. And so just that name recognition was one thing that like as a creator you're focused on, like I want to show the prettiest thing, and often like you want less text cuz like it pulls forward the art. That was one thing that next time I'll be
Yeah.
doing differently.
Interesting. And do you know how many email subscribers you received from the convention?
I do. So we I think we touched on this in the beginning of the episode, but we didn't have like our lift was like talk about the game, get them interested, and being like, we got one month left before we're closing late pledge, which was such a hard like sell, just because most people are, to your point, not necessarily coming to this convention to buy, but coming to connect, play, learn, and feel like what personally I believe to be the best parts of like the community. And so as a like a vendor there, not only are you facing that barrier of people just wanting to come and connect and not necessarily walk away with anything, but if they do want to walk away with something, you have to get the leaps and bounds over to like an internet page, a backing, seeing shipping, and being like, well, maybe I'll do that, but let's see how much money I got for spending money at the con first, and then the budget's gone.
Yep.
So what we did was this is just the box art of the prototype. We only have one of the pre-production copies left. We raffled one of the ones we were demoing off, like that like 30 minutes before the hall closed Saturday. So we had just name and email sign up slips, and we are just going to pull from a raffle. I had not knowing, like similar to how you like talked about how much inventory to bring, I didn't know how many sheets to print. And it was one of those where like in one breath, like printing way excess is a lot less expensive than having to take home inventory. But then there's also that like humbling element of like you printed 500 and you only had 50. It's like that's sort of one of those like tough pills to swallow. So we opted around. I think I brought like between 180 and 200. And in my head, I was like, if that happens, that'd be great. Like I would love to, have that many signups. And Friday, I ended up sending Steven out to go to FedEx to run and print more because we ended with I want to say like over 250. I think around 263 was like the final tally once you subtracted like customers that had the same duplicate email from either slipping in multiple entries because they really wanted to try and win, or like it was a group of 4 and there was clearly one person that wanted the game but they all signed different names to enter, which I think was a huge success. Just I kept making the joke of like, I didn't come into the convention with any expectations, so I exceeded my expectations, but I also didn't meet them and I'm a failure. Like that was like the joke I kept making to people. But I really think the fact that, I tried to, capitalize on that moment. Because if I said, hey, Steven, stay here, like we sold out, let's be happy with that. That's, 60 something opportunities that are missed.
Yeah.
And so that conversion, I think, ties back to like what I was selling at the convention was myself.
Yeah.
And like that, you were doing the same thing of just like engaging with anyone that came over, making sure that, if you could get a smile out of them, a laugh out of them, or like a moment during the convention that they could look back on and like be happy about, that was like what my goal was. And I think that translated in the number of people that even after submitting and like going through the process of being like, was that an O? Was that a 0? Of getting all the emails in and then having, sending out the welcome email and having, right now only 8 of that many that have unsubscribed because they clearly just wanted the gift. I think that like that is the result of just going there for genuine connections of like trying to show how invested you can be in the community. And I think Origins is the convention to do that because Gen Con and PAX Unplugged being the 2 like bigger ones for like moving volume, there's going to be less opportunity to do that. Whereas here you could like feasibly take moves and like meet and stop and take pictures and talk one-on-one with people. And like the volume of traffic is just a little smaller and a little more digestible to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead, Jacob.
I was going to say, I think onto your point where you're kind of talking about like being able to get a smile out of people, and also talking about the nature of the convention kind of catering more towards hardcore gamers. I think it's really important with volunteers, if you've got volunteers working your booth, is to make sure that you have people that are really enthusiastic about your game or your product, and that also really know how to communicate what makes your game great in a quick and efficient manner. So I know that we had a lot of people that we made sales that like the booth looked really attractive, and we had a ton of people that would like stop because the art is really eye catching. Not to dovetail too much there, but like I do think with those banners that you kind of talked about, like having your name visible, but really the importance of having like something eye catching within the color and stuff that you have
right there.
Like the Deliverance booth, you've got these like really gorgeous like golds and greens that are really eye catching. Like there's a lot of black and a lot of brown and a lot of gray, like just within the convention floor, just because the inherent like backdrops for a lot of booths are those like black curtains. So if you've got something that's like an eye catching pop of color, it's easy to get somebody's attention to at least stop and look for a minute. I think that helped us a lot. So people were stopping and taking in the art. But we had a lot of volunteers that were really eager and enthusiastic to be able to like talk to people about the game, and kind of engage them and invite them into the space. Like, hey, let me show you what kind of stuff comes in the box and that sort of thing. So I think being able to have people that you can be enthusiastic definitely helps, especially if they've got a friendly and outgoing attitude, because the convention is a lot more personal. So if you've got people that are really good at making kind of personal connections to people, I think that definitely helps. But onto the more hardcore gaming side of things, I would say that the thing that I was told the most when I would like greet people is like people stopping is like people saying, give me your quick elevator pitch about the game. I heard that a lot. And so if that goes with, I mean, obviously as the game designer, I think it's a bit easier for the designer to do that. But if you have volunteers at your booth, make sure that your volunteers can give a quick sell. Like if someone asks me what's the elevator pitch, make sure that your volunteers are informed on like what the key features are of your game, what are the aspects that you find most fun. If your game has been reviewed by reviewers, like what are the things that reviewers most liked about your game, and be able to quickly kind of communicate those things, because there were quite a few people that once we they would hey, what's a quick breakdown, what's the elevator pitch for Deliverance. I could give them a really fast insight into the game, and most of the time they would be like, well, can I see a little bit more? And that's kind of the hook. Like if you can get to that point that like they were taken by your quick elevator pitch and are interested, it provided opportunities for us to like show off the miniatures, to show off the angel cards and all the ways that you could customize your characters. And a lot of those people were like, do you have space to demo? And we were able to quickly get them in onto demo signups, because we had a ton of demos. I mean, we ran demos solid throughout the entire 4 days. And there were quite a few of those that were people that had never heard of Deliverance before. And so, we wanted to be able to give that quick elevator pitch, and being able to do that really helped us get some people in that had never played. And ultimately, a lot of them ended up leaving with the game. If they came and sat down for a demo, I would say there's a pretty decent conversion, if they didn't already own the game, that somebody within their group at a different table bought a copy of the game.
Yeah, we had, I want to say, I was thinking about, we ran demos solid from Thursday. So there were 9 hours on Thursday. There were 8 hours on Friday, 8 hours on Saturday from like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then there were 6 hours on Sunday. And from Thursday at about 10 a.m., we ran demos solid, 2 tables filled the entire time from, basically 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every one of those days. And the 6 hours on Sunday, we had, I think finally at like 3 p.m., we only had one table running on Sunday. So I think we ran between 55 and 60 demos of our game, which each took about an hour. It's, it's a longer, chunkier game, but, and there were lots of people watching and whatnot. And we sold 66 units of the game. And I looked and we've got, so since my last email was sent out, which was on Wednesday, we earned in fact, I could probably look at updated numbers, because the last I looked at this was yesterday. It was 128 email signups, in addition to, of course, generally, selling. Let's see, 156 is what the number is now. So we had 156 email subscribers, because of Origins. The new Council of the Fallen landing page and that kind of thing. And so that was generally, most of it was rather passive, because we were so busy talking about the game. And so what I expected was that, so the plan, in fact, for those watching on the video, or on video on YouTube, you can see our booth, and there's this QR code, this giant QR code that I had Jacob do for me. It wasn't a piece of paper. It was actually like a cardboard thing that I had Print Play Games print several of them. I would have printed twice as many of these QR codes so that they could have just been around. And we actually ended up, so like what actually happened in our booth, I feel like is really relevant for people, so that you can run great demos. I think our team ended up establishing such a solid way to give a demo, to lead people from like, what's your elevator pitch, into like, okay, show me what, more about the game, I'm interested, to signing up for a demo. Was like and then actually running the demo. There was a really incredible process that the team came up with that worked so well, that we'll definitely want to talk about. But before I do that, I would comment on the format of our booth. We ended up getting, so we had like basically 2 6-foot by 3-foot tables, and my tablecloths were built for 8-foot long tables. So like we kind of stuffed them, under a little bit, and just made sure the logo showed up nice and that kind of thing. But what we did was we put these 2 tables in the middle. I actually designed, so we got 6 banners that were like 3 foot wide by 8 foot tall. Then we had one big banner that was meant to be like the central banner, which was, 10 foot wide by 8 foot tall ish. And that was, I was supposed to have the big banner and then 2 small banners on the left and 2 small banners on the right. Well, it ended up that I miscalculated and the banners were a little too wide for, for the side, the length of the booth. I could only do 20 feet. I couldn't go outside of that. Otherwise they would tell me, to not, to stop it. And then I might actually end up getting fined or whatever if, so we had to figure out something else. So what we did was we took these 2 banners and made like a like a 90-degree box on each of the front corners. Because we, and you can see, like if you're watching video, you can actually see that the copies of our game are right behind them. And so it ends up that it was awesome because not only could you see the booth from the front, you could see it from the left and the right. So like no matter which direction, you saw these gigantic angels that were looking awesome. And the name of the game and that kind of thing. And they just stood tall and it just was a very attractive booth to look at. But I think we did really well as far as like the layout and the beauty and that kind of thing. But one thing I was told by Brotherwise Games, they had, their lead developer Hayden and one of their workers, Ethan. They actually helped me set up my booth on Wednesday. Which, by the way, quick advice: make sure you have more than just one person to set up your booth. It will help you a lot. I had to call in some favors, and so they told me, they kept saying like it looks like that was done intentionally, and so they kept saying that like. And what I gathered was that the booth needs to be purposeful. Every element of the booth needs to look like it's done on purpose, that it's not messy and that kind of thing. Because all of that goes into, at least the way that they look at it, all of that goes into the, what the customer feels about it. And so this was our format. It was incredible. I'm definitely using this for later. But if you guys are watching on video, or I can also describe it on audio, people would come down the left and the right, whichever side they came down. They would come down, they would see our game for the very first time, which was totally obscured by the black curtain behind our booth. So you had no idea that we existed unless you walked all the way around or, came from the left or the right. And so what would happen is they would look and they would start walking and they would kind of slow down. I saw people go from like, let's just say if we're talking about they're walking 3 miles an hour, they slow down to like half a mile an hour, and they're just like looking and, and watching people from the front. And then sometimes they would stop there and other times they would continue walking and they would just kind of be absorbing information. And then every single time they would stop at these tables, every time. We had what I call tall boy tables. They're like 3.5 feet tall, kind of bar height. So you're not meant to sit at them, and they're like for standing, room. And the image that you guys can see is from before the convention. But what we did was we put a Deliverance game and an expansion box on that that table with a QR code, like one of those cards that had a big QR code on it. It's like 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with QR codes, and then one that also had information about the game. Like this comes with new angels, new demons, new campaign, etc. And everybody stopped there, unless they were just totally not interested. Sometimes they're like, oh, I'm not interested, or maybe they're going off to something and only have 5 minutes left of the show, so they keep walking, right? But everybody stopped right here. And this was a place that all of my volunteers or myself, we could kind of say hi, and I would always break the ice in a way that was, like I would say, hey, have you guys heard of Deliverance before? That was like the number one thing that I would say. Like, have you guys heard of Deliverance before? And they might say, oh yeah, or oh no. And then I was like, oh great. Let me know if I can, if you guys want, I can give you the 1 minute quick elevator pitch. And there was not a single person that said no to that. Every single person said, yes, I would like to hear your quick 1 minute elevator pitch. Because like you said, Jacob, everybody wanted to hear that elevator pitch. They were just like, oh yeah, give me the quick 1 minute elevator pitch. So I just literally took, what other people were telling me and said, I can do the thing that everyone else wants if you would like. And everyone was very, very happy to hear that quote unquote quick 1 minute elevator pitch. So they oftentimes, sometimes we wouldn't be able to reach them in time, but I saw people snapping that QR code. And so it was very cool. And actually for the first 2 days, our QR code said it was like the not secure. This website is not secure or whatever. It's because I messed up the QR code. I put www dot whatever. And it was just a technical error that I made when making the QR code. Our security certificate for the website was for playdeliverance.com, not www.playdeliverance.com. So when I was sending people with the QR code to www, it made for an error. And I'm like trying to figure it out with my team back at home. They're like, the web team, they're like, everything looks fine on my end. I can't figure out why this error is happening. And then I figured out that it was because I put in the URL incorrectly in the QR code. But thankfully, it was a dynamic QR code. This is very important for everybody listening. You Google QR code generator, you get to whatever website, they're all owned by the same company. It's basically MailChimp is the one that owns all of these QR code companies. So no matter what it looks like, you hit the login, you actually log in, it brings you to the same exact interface. And you should not just get QR codes. You should get dynamic QR codes. That would mean you have a QR code that you can later update the website address. So one excellent area for every board game designer that should know about this, you should be able to put a QR code inside your rulebook for people to watch a tutorial video, and that URL may need to change. So what if you find a better video, someone does it better, or you get a more professional video? Maybe it's you just doing one real quick and then you need to upgrade that later. Well, thankfully, because my QR code was dynamic, I was able to edit and update it and save it, without actually having to get a new piece of paper that had a different QR code on it. I was able to go. I remember looking at Friday's signups, and it was like 34 email signups. I'm like, that's pretty low. It was like 39 total between Thursday and Friday. I'm like, that's really low. Just seems low to me, for the amount of traffic we've had, and how slammed we are. And then of course I went there and I was like, oh, well, that's why. And then sometime like mid-morning on Saturday, I figured it out. And then just the email signups started flooding in. And then I think afterward, people, I want to say we had like 109 email signups on like Sunday. And then like the next day and the day after, all the people that saw us went back and signed up, but it was very interesting. So those tables were, they were like $200 each to get them from Fern. I think I spent like $1,400 getting the equipment from the union controlled labor union, I guess, that brings in these tables and things. And they were worth every penny, every single penny. We sold all the games we had and then some. And so I was really happy about that. Do you have any? So you mentioned, Sam, you had some tips on the demo itself. I had, so, I got some advice from my people, and also advice from people before that really kind of helped, which was make sure that your demo is already staged and ready to go, so that when they sit down, you're for us in Deliverance, it's all about like choosing your character, like what angel will you play, because that's a big deal in the game. They do such different things. To call them asymmetric is like a massive understatement in how different they are from one another. And so it's like part of the excitement is choosing your character. But after that, like all the demons, all the map tiles, all the battle cards, all the standees, like everything should be already staged, and they should already have them in the correct places so that you can get started on the rules as quickly as possible. And I found that this was extremely useful. So we would set up for 4, and we could always, in Deliverance, it's very modular. We had a plan for what if only 3 people are there. We take away a map tile, and that's it, really. With the stuff that's on it, and we turn over one of the battle cards, so we're not fighting the abomination. I'm just going to turn that one over. But I'm not putting it back in the box because the next demo needs that card. So it just gets turned over instead of put back in the box. So I'm not having to do the shuffling and looking for things. That was a huge difference maker. And I heard many times that, from people, they would say, in general, we would start deliverance demos like on the hour, and they would go for an hour. And everybody was, we would always start like within 5 minutes of like on the hour, because the demo we kind of pre-selected the demons that you fight. We pre-generated the map so that everything was generally controlled, so that our game demo would last 1 hour. If we use different kinds of demons, then it might have been faster or whatever. But we wanted to give a good understanding. We wanted it to be a hard battle, so that they would be like, oh, I feel like we're gonna lose, but oh, we made it, and they feel really good. So we had some people end up losing, but for the most part, with a little bit of guidance, they all won. And I found people generally enjoy games more when they win, especially cooperative games. When they win together, they like it more. But yeah, it was very interesting. And I actually ended up finally on Sunday running demos myself. I've run this game like 2,000 times or something, but I was worried because all the other guys had to go home, except for Jacob and I were there on Sunday. And to run demos myself, I was a little intimidated at first, but because the process was so streamlined and everything was set up the right way, and everything was it was so quick. It was like, oh, you want to choose Azrael, the Angel of Death? Here's his talents, here's his character. They're all just right there for the player. And it was just quick. What was your experience like, Jacob, when you ran demos?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really helped that having that little bit of structure to be able to dive right in. We were able to get most of our demos going within like a 5 to 10 minute teach. And so it didn't take much. It definitely was a benefit, especially with a heavier game like Deliverance, to have everything already kind of staged. But it was, I found that we had a really easy time having players kind of jump in, and then being able to know your game. Like if there's certain things that you can kind of feed people a little bit as they go along, if you can get them started and kind of even bring some of your teach into where they're actually playing, I feel like that helps with their understanding of the concept of the game, and also kind of maybe how they should be playing their game. It's one of the things that I always appreciated from a rulebook standpoint that a lot of Stonemeyer games do, is they have this like quick play rule guide. So like for Scythe, for example, they're like, if you just want to jump into Scythe, you can read this like 1 page like quick start guide, and it's like on turn 1 do this, on turn 2 do this. And with that little bit of kind of like steering, it's kind of like hand holding a little bit, or the training wheels phase. Your players are able to kind of learn the game without feeling overwhelmed, especially if there's a lot of potential rule choices.
Mm-hmm.
So I know for a lot of our players with Deliverance, because there's so much customization between the different angel characters, we wanted them to feel like they had control over those characters and could kind of do the things that they wanted to. But it is one of those games that for some players, it takes a little bit to see how the whole thing works, or how they work as part of a team. And so we typically would, like Dan, our artist who ran a ton of demos, had said that he was like, I wanted them to make their initial choices. And if they made a mistake, then they made the mistake because they were the ones that were real quick to jump into it. But if you saw a player lagging for like 30 seconds or so, maybe even a minute on their turn, because you don't want things to go too long when you've got a limited demo space, it was like being able to offer just a little bit of helpful advice. Like, well, why don't you try using the prayer mechanic on this turn? Or you're playing a character that is really great at this, so why don't you try choosing one of these actions for your turn? And it was kind of like, oh, okay, you kind of would get that light bulb moment. It was like, oh, now it makes sense, like how this kind of works. So I think kind of being able to come, like if you can streamline your teach down into into a shorter segment to at least just the key features, enough to get them started, then through that first set of player turns, if you can provide just a little bit of coaching as they are playing, it helps them get into the game faster, without sacrificing like blowing their minds with a million rules and stuff like that, and they still feel like they're kind of in control of things.
Yep.
So I found that was really helpful. You had kind of mentioned, I also enjoyed that. I think that helped with our game is where Deliverance is a longer game, or can be a longer game. We were running the skirmish mode, and for new players, it might take you 45 minutes to an hour to run through one wave of a 2-wave skirmish. So for the sake of time, like being able to just run the first wave of the skirmish, I felt like worked really well with our game. It was enough that they could see how the game worked. Most of our players within that one skirmish wave were able to level up at least once, if not twice, and see how that worked. And they were able to at least do a couple different actions. And that worked really well to let them get a feel for the game without feeling like we needed to have this big 2-hour block to show it to them. And most of them after a demo were like, oh, okay, no, this is an easy sell. Like, yeah, I could do this. So I feel like if you've got a heavier game, if there is a way, as I saw, I feel like there were 2 ways that you could do it that worked really well. Ours worked really great that we did have a skirmish mission. If we could limit it just to the first wave, to run a 45-minute to an hour-long demo, I feel like it works really, really well. If you're a game that is going to take a lot longer than that, I know we had the Forges of Ravenshire booth was right around the corner from us. And they obviously, with their space, they had, I think they may have had a couple more tables going. But what they opted to do was they had one table set up to where they did a quick just demo themselves, where they like played through one turn, just they did it, showing players how the pieces work or how things move. And then if they were interested, they would move them to a sign up where they could jump in on a longer form demo. So I know that works if you've got a little bit more booth space to accommodate, but I feel like being able to kind of keep into that mind where you can keep things moving goes a long way to run an efficient demo.
It's very good. I'll also say that there was like kind of a 3-step process for me. The first step that I think is essential for everybody is the 1-minute short elevator pitch. Then you lead them. So you give them, you're like, and if you would like, I can share. This is what I would always lead with. I was the one that was kind of getting people into signing up for the demos, and while my team ran the demos. And so I would give them the elevator pitch. I would ask if they would either like to sign up for a demo, or which I directed them to a piece of paper that they could put their name that has like 10 a.m. or whatever, table 1, table 2, that kind of thing. Or if they would like to hear more about what the reviewers and players found most interesting and attractive about the game. And a lot of the time, I would say, maybe like 15-20% of the time, people would say, yeah, I'm interested in this. I want to sign up for a demo. And they would just do that. And then I wouldn't need to share with them all the, what the reviewers had to say or what the players had to say. But a lot of the time they weren't convinced. Like 80% of the time they were like, oh yeah, maybe a small percentage of those people, very small, were like, oh, we have to go or whatever. And that's why we separate those things from like the 1-minute elevator pitch. I gave it to them. Now they have an opportunity, and this is very important. I need to give them the opportunity to say no, thank you, in a way that's not like, doesn't embarrass them or put them on the spot or whatever. It's like, okay, I did the thing that you asked. Now, if you want to, we can be done, or we can, advance into, I can share with you more about what the angels and like how they function and how the tactical combat's balanced against the darkness deck. And that's what people love about this. And of course you can see the artwork and presentation that everybody loves, and those were generally the 3 things. And so if they were like, yes, tell me more, but I'm not yet ready to sign up for a demo, what I would do is I would bring them to the end of the table. So where like in, I'll share my screen one more time for those that are interested. Where the end of the tables are, you can see the QR code and information that actually we moved and traded places with the angel cards with the talents, so that I could show them, this is how, when your character levels, this is what happens. Like you get to select these, talents and whatever. And I would show them that, okay, this game, I chose these talents, those talents, and the other talents. And I'm this epic high damage dealing roguelike character that, whatever. Now, if I just make one change, bam, it's like, dude, I'm the tank that wants to stay in front. I'm epic and damage dealing, but I want to absorb damage. Look, if I make this change, now I'm this huge healer that is also a tank that can hold my own. But generally, I'm using my damage dealing skills for movement more than whatever. And it was just like changing one talent was like, whoa, that's really great. So then I tell people there are 125 combinations of these. So you could play the same character a dozen times and it would always be a different experience. And that sometimes people would just buy a game on the spot. They would just see the intrigue of what happens. And in that case, I'm like, I'm not like, no, you should sign up for a demo first. I'm like, yeah, okay, here's my cash or card, which by the way, I will say, very important to be able to take cash. You should have like $20 in $1 bills and $20 in $5 bills. And that's generally all you need in order to that's like petty cash. People will give you 20s or whatever, and you'll generally be okay. But you should also have a credit card reader if you're selling stuff. Stripe is really easy and really useful. You can get a Stripe credit card reader. I had to use an app called the Collect app. Let me see on my phone. Yeah. So the Collect app, so like if you look at my phone, I've got the Collect app right here. Stripe uses all third-party stuff, but it's very easy to set up. You can just punch in the price and then connect it with via Bluetooth to your credit card reader, or I can press this button right here that has inventory, and then you can see on the white area it's like Deliverance Deluxe game $99 and T-shirt 25, bundle of 3 60, so that became very easy. I also found at our booth that anytime I would leave, we actually almost missed out on a sale because I was gone. And I had 2 credit card readers, which I promptly lost one. And so it was like hidden in our booth somewhere, and then which we found on Sunday. And so giving the reader to someone else was so helpful. Having them download the app and logging in, and whatnot, on their phone, so that if I had to go to the restroom or if I was busy, we were always passing the credit card reader back and forth. It was like, hey, reader, or, I'd call like, hey, Nate, I need your reader, and, the credit card reader. And it was very rather seamless, and it was very helpful to have a backup person that could take payments. So I got a fanny pack. I tried to look for like, a fanny pack that was like resistant to knives, like I've heard stories about how people, will travel Essen or Gen Con or whatever and like cut the fanny pack off and run with it real quick. Which I was like hoping that somebody would try that so that I could turn him into a pretzel and look like a hero in front of all the people out. But anyway, so that's generally how that went.
I
One
would have
other thing
staged that if you wanted.
would be fun. So one other thing I'll mention, and this was like a real like kind of a miracle in some ways and just a really fun, heartwarming story in others. So we didn't have any food in our booth, and it's you need snacks. Like, would you agree, Sam?
Yeah, it definitely. I would say the average person definitely needs stacks. I won't go into my style of eating, but I'm a 2 meal person, so it wasn't a huge issue for me. But I definitely think that you like, especially where like I'd say, Andrew, you probably can endure the suffering because you like Deliverance is you, and like that is never going to change how you sell the game. For your volunteers and everyone helping you, the more hungry they are, the less like engaged, like even the most engaged people will like at some point
We'll
suffer
fall
without
off.
being
Yep.
nourished. Yeah, so there is it's going from like that A plus plus to an A level
Yeah.
is sometimes will be too
Yeah,
much.
I'll also say, you said you were a 2 meal person. I am like, I'm not a grizzled veteran, but I'm experienced enough to know you eat a big breakfast. You need to eat a big breakfast. And it was funny because the first day it was like Jacob, you were there, and Dan, and we had a team of like I want to say the four of us were there, and it was like, okay, we're gonna get some food, or maybe it was like 5 of us. We're gonna get food, and we went to this breakfast place, and I spent like $26 on the what you would call it, like the buffet, and everyone was like, "Oh, I'll get a lox bagel, with salmon on it. It's bagel." And for me, I'm like just stacking the bacon and the pancakes, and I had them make me an omelet too. So I had like 3 plates of food, and I just slam all of that down, and I'm actually fine, that day. And it's one other, I can't remember who it was, but generally they ate more food for breakfast. And I think like I'm never like, other people will leave the booth. This was my thought. Other people will leave the booth for lunch or to whatever, but I'm going to stay there all day if I can and only use the restroom if that's the only reason I'm going to leave. And it ended up that the folks that ate like relatively healthy light breakfast were super hungry, and because we didn't have any snacks, they were really suffering. And this elderly couple came along, and they were like, they became like super fans. They were super nice to us. They bought t-shirts and bought a game and that kind of thing. And they asked like, "Are you hungry?" And I actually left for a meeting with Longpack, our manufacturer, and I ate like all their Snickers bars. Like they had candy out there. I found every Snickers bar and every Almond Joy and ate them all. It's like, well, good. There's my lunch. Like I knew I needed some fuel, so I just ate all the fun size Snickers bars and left like the Hershey's and like the low quality candy for everyone else. And so I'm sure they had more, But then when I came back, I was like, I'm fine, but you're right. Yeah, I mean, actually, I think my booth, and I said, "Yeah, they're kind of hungry." And this lady busted out like 2 bananas and like snack bars, and was like, "Here, here." And I gave them out. Like, Jacob, you remember that moment?
I
It was
do.
like the clouds parting and like the food coming down from the sky, and
Yeah.
I remember it was just like such a relief.
Yeah.
And that night we ended up going to like Walmart or whatever and buying a bunch of food for the booth. It's like, dude, we have to make sure to stay fueled because we all realized none of us are leaving this booth to get lunch. Like, I'm not going to go get a pizza and sit for 30 minutes and eat on my lunch break. No, I want to stay active for as long as I can because we're all so passionate about this thing that none of us wanted to leave. So it was
The,
a big lesson learned.
the same couple came back the next day and brought us a box of giant sized chocolate chip cookies and like the biggest tub of peanuts I think I've ever seen in my life.
That was so cool. And
Yeah.
they bought like a ton of t-shirts, and they were wearing the shirts that they got the other day, and they were just like, they it was just like my nana and
Yeah.
papa, my grandparents were there, and I gave them big hugs, and they just loved our team.
So
It was
maybe
so
that's a
cool.
tip. Love
Yeah.
on the nanas and the grandpas when you see them. Make them
Yep.
super fans and they'll take care of you.
They will, dude. They will. And one other thing I'll say that I found to be really cool. There were so there aren't that many kids. Like when I say kids, like there are babies and there are toddlers, but kids ranging, let's just say from like the age of like 10 to 16. Um, there are not that many of them. But every set of kids that came ended up twisting their parents' arms till they bought a game. It was awesome. They just had such a fun time that they're like, always the parents are like, should we get this? They look at the kid. The kids are always, rather, we'll say, rather introverted, usually, in my experience. Um, and the kid looks and like shakes their head enthusiastically, yes. Like that's, and it was just, it's all because they went and demoed it and had a great experience. And there was one case where, there was one guy who was a pastor, and he came with his daughter, and his daughter was around 16 years old. And I said, or he said, "Oh, this game's a little out of my price range, and but I was like, "Oh, that's okay. Like we're actually doing a version that is going to cost less in the future. That's kind of like an essentials edition that has like only 5 characters and less components, less cost, right?" And so like, okay, and so they came and demoed it, and then they came back like 2 days later with the daughter just telling dad, you got to buy this game. You have to buy this game. I need this game. And they were just like, they were like, okay, well, we're just going to buy fewer things and this is the big thing that we're going to get, and it was just really cool, so I think don't neglect the kids, never assume. So for me, like if a husband walks up and there's a group and there's a wife with the kids in the back, I will always of course shake the husband's hand, and as he's introduced himself to me and I introduce myself to him, I always will interrupt and shake the wife's hand too, and even like talk to the kids. Like I think it's important to acknowledge people's existence, and I've had many cases. My wife has been neglected by salespeople, and the reason that those salespeople didn't sell a thing was because she got totally ignored. Kind of a next level selling thing. I don't know if that's your experience either, guys, but
Well, we had like you had mentioned like the daughter being like, "Come on, Dad, you got to get it. You have to buy it." Uh, I'll tie it back into the one thing I wanted to jump back to about you like leading them to the hook of like that, showing the character customization. We had one of the kids after kind of our quick, less than 5 minute overview of the game. He just kept repeating, "This looks like the type of game that I'd love. This looks like the type of game that I'd love." And he kept looking at his mom, like clearly trying to send a message. So I looked back at her. I was just like, "This looks like the type of game that we would love." And she ended up coming back on Sunday, being like, "Hey, we just ordered it. Hopefully, like you fulfill before Christmas, because it's like we're looking at it for an awesome Christmas present." And I was like,
that's amazing.
"No pressure there."
That's
But,
awesome. Yep.
I definitely think that if you like, especially in like we weren't doing I wasn't doing 1 minute elevator pitches. I was doing overviews in less than 5 minutes because you could get a little more space to like build up to that hook. I would always make sure to try and get contact with everybody that was listening, because that like I often found that sometimes the person that would make the entry point to get them into the conversation wasn't necessarily the person that was most interested in asking questions at the end to learn more. And so I think that the more you can just engage with everyone, and like body language is important. So like when you're demonstrating, the more that you can communicate and point without like hunching over the board and like moving anything and being consumed in the game, and just like reading the body language of like, are you talking too fast? Are you going too slow? Like, are you over explaining? That is huge to like be able to convey the message of the game at all different levels of like the audience. I think that was a huge thing that led to our success in terms of like engagement and follow up. I think that there's also that like teaching a game is so different than giving a 5 minute overview. And it like you had talked about how to stage the game. It like worked against every fiber of my being, but like you do not need it to represent a real like like a functional real life gameplay of like that exact moment. Not everything has to work. Like you don't have to be able to walk back all the steps that you took to get it there. But I think it's so important in knowing that, and not like the 5 minute overview shouldn't be the same as the first 5 minutes of how you teach how to play the game. Like you touched on the like deliverance, like that hook is like that the character like progression and like the powers and abilities, like how you build your character is why you come back to that game. And so the ability to quickly show with one skill change, like how vastly a different the play style can be, is like it's not surprising that you had people be like, "Stop, take my money now." That was one of the things I talked with Steven, who helped run the demo, the overviews with me, is like build to what the hook is. Like we talked about it with pre-marketing and things like that, of like communicating that hook visually, but like leading the customer to like why Deliverance, why Everstone, why is this game in front of them the reason that they want to come to it so important. And so we actually cut out half of explaining like the first two actions, because like while they are important in terms of understanding them and winning the game, they are not important to like conveying like the feeling and action, like conveying what is the reason why someone would want to play Everstone. And so we would do that like, kind of garbled version of, these are the mechanics you can find. Here's a quick example of a turn. But what the game's really built around is these 4 actions. And the first 2, while necessary, aren't important in like the repairing and choosing. And then that harvest mechanic are the 2 things that like if you did the pitch right, you would see people be like,
Yeah,
oh,
and
and
I
like
saw
that
your pitch
reaction is
actually, and what you did. So imagine like a board that looks like Scythe, where you have 4 actions, and the way that Scythe makes it more interesting for people that have no idea what Scythe is, you start to those actions start to become more powerful because you remove cubes with Everstone, and get to do additional things, get additional resources or whatever. But with Everstone, you start to like you find these relics that you repair that you can like slot under your player board underneath one of those actions, and it expands what that action does. So the engine starts building your caravan. It's almost like the those actions become more powerful. And then what I loved was that you may decide to kind of sacrifice some of that power in the actions by removing one of those cards and kind of consuming it for either it was points or something like that. It was like points
Yeah,
or
that
resources.
like
Yeah.
it's like the impetus behind the game was I wanted an engine builder that like while building the engine, you could choose to sacrifice for the right now. And so the
Yeah.
game's built around that decision on every card that you choose to take into your system. Do I want the reward immediately? Will it help me immediately, or can I leverage
Mhm.
this turn after turn? And
Yeah.
so being able to build to that, it's like you have to quickly show how cards come into your engine, and then like the way the
Mhm.
board finishes is that under each of the 4 actions is your hand, so you can only have 4 cards you're working on at a time.
Yep.
And the importance of showing that like there's a negative of taking on cards because until you repair them, they weaken those actions is one of the selling points. So like it doesn't matter like all of the actions that happen in the barter. It's this is how you get cards in, why it's important, why you don't want them there for a long time. Like
Yeah.
that like from a selling point is huge, that you like every game wants to know the why, and not necessarily the how to, because
Right.
the it was
Because the how
funny.
to is boring. That's for there's the one person that reads the rule book and learns the rules and teaches everyone else. That's the person needs to understand the how to. Everyone else wants to get past that as quickly as possible into the fun, right? The fun part of game night isn't learning the rules. It's, slaying
It's
demons
the
for me by the righteous
exactly.
power of God. That's what I would tell people. Every once in a while somebody would be interested in playing. I was like, would you like to slay demons by the righteous power of God? They're like, yes. you know, um,
Yeah,
so anyway, it was fun.
it was
Now, oh, go ahead.
I was just the funny anecdote is like we were only doing that 5 minute like here's everything campaigns, still like late pledge open for a month, like giving them the opportunity to convert into a follower sale. um that was what we focused on because it's like 5 minutes a clip, and you can like get way more traction there from like a selfish standpoint of just like being able to connect with as many as you want or as many as you can, versus the demo or playthrough side where it's you might have 4 people that have a profound impactful experience, but that
Mhm.
Everstone's a 30-minute per player game, so that's 2 hours a clip, and you
Yep.
immediately like start to diminish the opportunities you have to engage with people.
Mhm.
Um, all that to say that in the evenings, the first 2 nights, we set up in the open play just because there was, that interest in like
Mhm.
sitting down to run abbreviated games. And I actually, when teaching the game, was still in that like, you know, build up to like selling of like why you want to play. And I was like, I need to start explaining the how, because it's
Mhm.
like that now is important, because if they're not enjoying the game or they feel like I'm not teaching rules, that it's just that total shift that
Yep.
I only did 2 of them just because I couldn't switch my brain fast enough on the fact that booth ends or closes at 6:30 to get out of there, and I still need to find an hour or something to eat my second meal. That
Yep.
it was just it was it was one of those as much as I'd love to have infinite energy to play Everstone with everyone that ever wanted to,
Mhm.
I need to think about the next day and getting it through the convention. Because
Yeah, and
one of the
maybe
things that you may not have the vantage point to talk about, because I don't know if you're like so with low end games of like trying to build and do on your own, I'm sure there are a few people in my shoes that are not necessarily opposed to the idea of partnerships or getting picked up for distribution and making connections like within established companies of like I don't know if that is your path forward with Deliverance or not, but it was something that was a focus of mine with this convention, as well as finding the right partnerships and finding those people that I could potentially, have a mutual benefit with.
Yep.
And that goes back
Got a stack
to
of cards right here. They're
well,
all
so
over.
yeah, it ties directly back to what Brotherwise was saying to you about like things being intentional. If you look scattered about and like we had free candy that we were gonna like offer to those passing by. We opted against having the candy out there just because it became cluttered. Like we had our stickers in stacks piles as opposed to like thrown about because it's like that everything needs to be intentional, whether it's just like trying to connect with the customer or connect with those that might want to work with you.
Yep.
And so that in itself was another reason why not having that 8x10 background banner, it's like, you know, maybe my personality and able to communicate that with those that stopped by overcame that initial like first impression. But like, you just want to know that one thing I didn't realize going into it was, you're going to have manufacturers come talk to you. You're going to have logistics come talk to you. You're going to have
Yep.
other designers that are looking to like have you pick up their games. Like you're going to be solicited too, just
Yep.
as much as you are soliciting those walking by. And that's something that you want to go in A, expecting, and B, potentially like, what I like to do is I like to just, sit and do that role play while I'm brushing my teeth of like not saying it out loud, but think, okay, what if Andrew comes up and is like, I love Everstone, like this is something that I want to bring into low end games. Like, how do I react to that? Like, like how do I like have those conversations in your head,
Yep.
whether they're going to come to reality or not? There were a couple opportunities that I was able to capitalize on with other industry people that might have just like, been tongue tied or, um, you know, could have said the right thing, wrong thing. Maybe they don't even work out, but it's just that importance of like, I think
You never
Gamma is
know
a
where
lot
the
of that,
roads will
like you had
lead.
mentioned, but yeah, it's just being prepared for scenarios that you want to like almost even speak into existence.
Mhm.
So there was a couple of those where I was throwing out uh like being able to talk with TK one on one was one thing that I like wanted to do and was able to do. But like so TK of Kins and Key
Uh-huh.
was something
Galactic
that
Cruise, right?
yeah, Galactic Cruise that launched 3 weeks after mine and made me feel like a tiny little imp in the crowdfunding space. But it was awesome to get to connect with them because we've talked a bunch like online, but like figuring out where and like you know putting that out into the universe of like how you want to go about that is super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good feedback to maybe even end on. Jacob, do you have any final thoughts? We've been doing this for closing in on an hour and 45 minutes. Holy cow. But I hope everybody that's still listening is finding it valuable. Everything that Sam was sharing, or that's all good stuff. What
Yeah.
final thoughts do you have, Jacob?
Man, I feel like we've covered the full gamut here. There were some great nuggets here. I mean, overall, I think Origins is a fantastic convention. It's definitely one that's worth exploring. If you're kind of new, I feel like it's probably the convention to dive into if you're going to go to. Uh, if you're looking for your first big convention to try to show off your product, I feel like Origins is probably a much better convention to do that than to dive into something like Gen Con, just because of the nature of the convention with people wanting to demo, the slightly slower pace of people moving around and checking things out. So
Mhm.
it's a little bit less crowded trying to navigate through the halls and through the booths. So I feel like if there's anybody that's kind of on the fence or they're trying to linger, that I would maybe just end it with that. Is that I think our experience was pretty solid, and it's one I would recommend checking out if you want to make that jump to a big convention. But as far as any other advice, I don't think I've got anything else.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, people ask what are the attendance numbers for Origins, and I have seen so many different, I mean, people say, oh, 5,000 and whatever. There were a total of 17,706 attendees in Origins Game Fair 2024. That was 10% higher than last year. In 2019, which was like, the pre-pandemic, there were over 20,000 people. So it's approaching its quote unquote pre-pandemic numbers. And I would say that it was just an incredible convention for vendors because there were a lot of people compared to what I would imagine the 2019 vendor quantity was. I think that the fact that there were, maybe 20% fewer vendors or so, some of that due to people going out of business, others because maybe, I don't know, some people didn't feel comfortable going to a big convention yet. Just, I don't know, just depending on how you look at things. These numbers are really encouraging. So there are a lot of people going to conventions. It's also I think it's the perfect blend between game players and game buyers. So there are a lot of people that bring money and plan on buying games at this convention. Whereas something else like, Board Game Geek, for example, Board Game Geek, you would say, one of the BGG Con or BGG Spring, that's for game players. And there are people with booths and everything, and it certainly is going to cost less and be less logistical, of a logistical headache. But you're going to get a lot more emails on your list. You're going to get a lot more products sold. And so I would say your mileage may vary, but if if you're bringing product to sell, this is a good one to actually sell stuff.
Yeah. Maybe one
So
other last thing to add with that too is I know that there were a lot of major publishers that had ducked and didn't appear at Origins. Like you don't have like Asmodee, you don't have Fantasy Flight, you don't have some of those other like bigger groups having booths. And some people might see that as a detriment, but I think for people that are if you're independent game designers or like this is our first game and Sam this you had yours, for some of the smaller publishers, I feel like it's almost a little bit of a blessing because it lets some of the smaller publishers get to take a bit more of the spotlight.
yeah.
So who knows? We may see if numbers continue to go up and things kind of readjust. That may change, but I think a lot of big publishers, because of the proximity of Origins to Gen Con, like they're only like a month and a half apart. There's a lot of big publishers save their releases and do the Gen Con thing because I do think Gen Con is more of a buyer's convention. They're looking to just like move a whole lot of product. So some of those bigger publishers are saving their big releases and may not do an Origins appearance. But the trade-off is that, yeah, like some of the smaller publishers then get the opportunity to steal some of the spotlight and appear in a more prominent position, which ultimately I think suits the hobby better because it allows some of these great games to get the exposure that they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Sam, your game Everstone, as you mentioned, it was closing in about a month. If you guys are interested, Everstone Discovering Ignis is available via late pledge on GameFound. You can just Google it, Everstone. Everstone Kickstarter is a great way to do it. But you can find the late pledge on GameFound. And where can people connect with you, Sam?
So McDavid Publishing, my last name. For those that are watching, it's in my little video call button. But MCDAVIT, McDavid Publishing on all socials is where I'm at, as well as McDavidPublishing.com is my own personal website. And with the Game Found, it's open for another month and a half. We'll be honoring our initial Kickstarter pledge level, which was the $59 price point of a $70 MSRP game. No Kickstarter Deluxe or anything like that. We're only closing it in a month and a half because we are on target to hit an end of the year fulfillment. And so that is, we're going to focus on that first and foremost.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure that that's in the show notes.
The components and stuff look incredible. The artwork is great. It's got these really awesome giant covered wagon meeples. There's some really, really cool components. So if you like to play with neat components and solid gameplay, it's a full package.
Yeah, and
there's
like a hidden little deliverance Easter egg in there with the courage token, which is pretty awesome. So definitely didn't hurt adding that, but loved the campaign, and I love the enthusiasm. Thanks so much for your time, Sam, and it's time for Robot Richard to send us out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.